So, Dire Straits. To some, the embodiment of dullness.
Dire Straits. Throw it.
To many, the defining musical flavor of the late 70s and 80s.
Jesus, woman, I'm in dire straits here!
Whatever your opinion of the band may be, one thing is certain. 40 years ago, they were everywhere. On the radio, in the brand new CD stores, and of course, on MTV. Let's take a deep dive into Dire Straits' Brothers in Arms, because this year marks the album's 40th anniversary. Hello, and welcome to a new episode of We're Only in It for the Music, a brand new YouTube series that takes you on a musical journey through videos about pop, rock, jazz, blues, soul, and funk. In other words, from ABBA to Zappa and everything in between. If you're enjoying this series, don't forget to click like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you'll always be the first to know when a new episode drops. But enough of that. Never mind the bollocks. We're only in it for the music. In May 1985, Dire Straits released their fifth studio album, Brothers in Arms. The commercial success was massive, thanks in part to its state-of-the-art recording quality, which offered a brand new listening experience tailored for a recently launched music format. The compact disc, better known as the CD. Hi-fi stores eagerly used the album to convince customers to trade in their dust-collecting vinyl for these shiny new silver discs. And to demonstrate the sound quality of CD players, they frequently and gratefully played the crystal-clear production of Dire Straits' latest album. Many customers left the store not only with a brand new stereo system, but also with a copy of Brothers in Arms on CD. As a result, the album became the very first CD to sell over 1 million copies. After finishing the tour for their previous album, Love Over Gold, brilliantly captured on the live double album Alchemy,
Dire Straits double album.
Mark Knopfler and his band headed to the Caribbean island of Montserrat to begin work on its successor. Their destination, AR Studios, owned by none other than the fifth Beatle, George Martin. For this new chapter, Knopfler updated his signature Fender Stratocaster tone by switching to a Gibson Les Paul. From November 1984 to February 1985, the band worked alongside producer Neil Dorfsman to shape what would become their fifth studio album. At the time, the Dire Straits studio lineup featured frontman Mark Knopfler on lead guitar and lead vocals and songwriter.
Oh, hi, Mark.
John Illsley on bass and vocals. Alan Clark on piano and Hammond organ. Guy Fletcher on synthesizers and vocals. And Terry Williams, whose drumming appears in the now iconic intro of Money for Nothing, though he was replaced after 6 weeks by Omar Hakim. Guitarist Jack Sonny joined on synth guitar, replacing Hal Lindes, who left early in the process. A full cast of session musicians was brought in to enrich the album's sound, including Michael and Randy Brecker on saxophone and trumpet, Omar Hakim on drums, Tony Levin on Chapman stick bass, and of course Sting, who provided guest vocals on Money for Nothing. Except for Sting and Hakim, most session overdubs were recorded later at Power Station Studios in New York. In interviews, Knopfler said that once the band found its rhythm, the recording process went surprisingly smoothly. Quite a feat, considering Mark and Koa were known for their perfectionism. Because Brothers in Arms is so closely associated with the CD format, we'll stick to the CD track listing for convenience. Not that it differs from the LP version, but the album isn't divided into two sides in this case. The album opens with So Far Away, followed by Money for Nothing, Walk of Life, Your Latest Trick, and Why Worry. Then comes Right Across the River, The Man's Too Strong, One World. And finally, the album closes with the epic title track, Brothers in Arms. The album was released on May 17, 1985, wrapped in its now iconic cover featuring a resonator, National guitar, the same instrument Knopfler had previously played on Romeo and Juliet, from the Making Movies album. Brothers in Arms became an instant commercial triumph. It spent 14 consecutive weeks at #1 on the UK Albums Chart. It won a Grammy Award in 1986 for Best Engineered Album Non-Classical and was named Best British Album at the 1987 Brit Awards. The 20th anniversary reissue earned another Grammy in 2006 for Best Surround Sound Album. In 2020, Rolling Stone ranked Brothers in Arms at number 418 on its list of the 500 greatest albums of all time. Q Magazine placed it at number 51 on its list of the 100 greatest British albums ever. Brothers in Arms is, commercially speaking, the absolute peak of Dire Straits' career. With 5 hit singles, any fan would consider this album essential. While I sometimes find the production a bit too sterile for my taste, the songwriting throughout is so consistently strong that the glossy 80s sound doesn't bother me as much as it usually does on other albums from that decade. Another factor, these songs, especially the singles, have been played to death over the past 40 years, which distorts my perspective when revisiting the tracklist and picking my favorites. But I'm partly to blame. Brothers in Arms was the first Dire Straits CD I bought with my own money, and I played it endlessly. The album opened strong with So Far Away, a perfectly fine track, but I've simply heard it too often. Compared to opening tracks on earlier albums like Down to the Waterline, Tunnel of Love, or the epic Telegraph Road, this doesn't quite hit the same mark in my opinion. That said, the loneliness of a musician on the road, longing for love and home, is beautifully expressed in the song's lyrics. Money for Nothing is and will always be a classic. The sound, the video, the lyrics, everything about it screams 80s. The story of how Knopfler was inspired while overhearing a guy in an appliance store has become as legendary as the track itself. The second verse was later altered for the compilation album of the same name and live versions due to controversy, though Knopfler always stated that the lyrics were taken nearly word for word from what the man in the store had actually said. The lead character in Money for Nothing is a guy who works in the hardware department in a television custom kitchen / refrigerator / microwave appliance store. He's singing the song. I wrote it when I was actually in the store. I borrowed a bit of paper and started to write it down. I wanted to use a lot of the actual language I heard because it felt more real. Sting contributes a lovely melodic line, which you might recognize from Don't Stand So Close to Me by the Police.
I want my MTV!
At the time of recording, Sting happened to be on holiday nearby and decided to drop in. A mega hit was born. The rest is history. I've been on vacation too, but I've never bumped into Sting, let alone had him sing on one of my songs. Walk of Life has never done much for me. It's been overplayed, and the cheesy little organ riff doesn't help. In the context of Dire Straits' discography, I've never really cared for the more rockabilly-style tracks like Twisting by the Pool, The Bug, or Two Young Lovers. I do prefer the live version on the On the Night album over the studio cut. Lyrically strong, musically not quite my thing. Your latest trick is a jazzy gem, pure film noir in tone, with one of the most beautiful saxophone melodies I've ever heard in pop music. After hearing it for the first time, it stayed in my head for a week. It fits Knopfler's speak singing style perfectly. He's never been a powerhouse vocalist, but his songwriting is so good that he's always known how to work within his vocal limitations to craft timeless songs. Why Worry, beauty jokingly referred to by Knopfler himself as Why Bother, feels a bit too mellow for me. Mark's tasteful and virtuosic guitar playing often overshadows the fact that he's also a superb lyricist and storyteller. This song, however, doesn't showcase his lyrical strengths. At over 8.5 minutes, it's the album's longest track, and that's part of the issue. It meanders for far too long before it arrives at its stunning outro, where Knopfler finally does what he does best, weaving delicate guitar licks together. Curiously, the live version on the Anniversary Edition bonus discs omits this outro. A shame, since Levitt could have really shone. Speaking of the Anniversary Edition, we'll take a closer look at that bonus live show in the next episode. 2 Dire Straits episodes in a row. What more could you want? Right Across the River ventures into art rock territory. With hypnotic drums, layered percussion, and world music textures, the track immediately transports you on a journey down the river. Knopfler's gift for painting vivid stories with sound is on full display here. It plays like a soundtrack to a film that doesn't exist. The mood and sound remind me of Peter Gabriel's So, likely due to the flute-like synth in the intro. Sledgehammer? Anyone? The Man's Too Strong suffers, in my opinion, from an overly 80s production style. Stripped down, it might have been much more powerful. In terms of tone and theme, it reminds me of Iron Hand from the On Every Street album. But the production here hasn't aged as well. One World is a welcome burst of energy that the album desperately needs to avoid getting bogged down in too many mid-tempo tracks. With such a catchy vibe, you have to wonder why this song wasn't released as a single as well. Then again, restraint wasn't exactly the motto of the 1980s. And one more single wouldn't have made a difference to this already massive success. I want more MTV. I want more hit singles. And finally, Brothers in Arms, the title track and closing song, an instant classic, and one of the finest pieces in the entire Dire Straits and Knopfler solo catalog. That calm, haunting guitar intro is now iconic, a reminder that you don't need speed or flash to make a powerful musical statement. A beautiful ending to a beautiful album? Some bands are defined by one iconic song. Bohemian Rhapsody for Queen, Stairway to Heaven for Led Zeppelin, Hotel California for the Eagles.
And I hate the fucking Eagles, man.
For Dire Straits, Sultans of Swing will always be their most iconic track. But Brothers in Arms has touched so many hearts over the past 4 decades that it remains one of the band's absolute masterpieces. It was a different time. The Falklands War dominated the headlines, and Brothers in Arms became the unofficial soundtrack to that war. My personal favorites from Brothers in Arms are Money for Nothing, Your Latest Trick, Right Across the River, One World, and of course, the title track. And that wraps up episode number 1. That was Dire Straits' Brothers in Arms. What do you think of Dire Straits? What do you think of Brothers in Arms? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to check out the full Spotify playlist with all the music from this series via the link below. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time. And in the meantime, drop the needle, press play, and remember, we're only in it for the music.